Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Extreme Studios in the Pinos Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I have from the Great Midwest One RDV. And tonight's movie selection that we're reviewing with you, ladies and gentlemen, Death Wish, the original one with Charles Bronson from, I believe, 1974.
Yep.
Now, RDV, this is not a canon classic, but we recently reviewed Death Wish 3, which is a lot of fun. And we said, you know what? Nothing beats a good revenge movie, going back to some of the earlier 70s exploitation type films, and this is definitely one of the tops of my list. This is a fantastic film, very controversial. Charles Bronson, for several years, I would say late 60s, early 70s, you could argue is the most popular movie star in the world, literally, with some of his Italian films and stuff here in America.
Yes.
But boy, oh boy, what a great film. Hadn't seen this in a long time, just rewatched it earlier today, loved it. What's your initial take on it?
Last time I watched this was probably 10 years ago or more. Not too long ago, but I mean, I've seen clips of here on YouTube because people are on Instagram, people upload reels, and especially when I think it was 2015 or 16 when the reboot came out with
The Bruce Willis one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched that, and that prompted me to go back and watch the originals, and I just started going through the trilogy. I guess I call it. I go through a trilogy because I never watched the fourth, the fifth one. I always watched 1, 2, 3. I figured it's like after a while, it kind of gets old. Same thing over and over again. But that being said, I haven't watched 4. But this movie is once you get past the death of his wife and the rape of his daughter, the movie really picks up. Especially when there's that scene where he basically they want to ship him out to Arizona. Because New York. He just everything he's been through. Goes to Arizona, meets the gun club guy, gets the gun. You hear the story. Every scene in here, there's so many pivotal scenes. Like when he gets he first holds the gun, tells the story. It's like and you kind of get the first picture of this guy. This is a guy. He's pretty much liberal. He's kind of anti-gun a little bit.
A little classical, old school liberal, which is a little bit different than by today's political terms.
Excuse, I apologize. I mean, old school Democrat, old school. Basically, don't need guns. As long as everybody leaves me alone, I'm fine. But the unthinkable happens. I mean, like from the very beginning, this movie, like you see, like he's on vacation with his wife. She's on the beach. He's taking photos, and then. So it builds up this whole thing, and so if you've never seen this movie, getting up to this point, and then all that happens, it is such a shock to your system.
Yes,
it is. It is like it just catches you off guard. So I mean, like I always tell people, go into this movie without watching a trailer. Just go into it. I'll just say that it's a vigilante film, and that's about it.
And we reviewed the entire Dirty Harry series filmography here. We're big Clint Eastwood fans and Charles Bronson fans, and one of the things about it too is he works for the government, right? Because he's a police guy, and he may have morals or whatever. But it's interesting because after World War II, you have this post-war boom here in the United States. And people talk about being the most productive, happiest time in American history. It's debatable, I suppose, but by the 60s, after Korean War, with communism or shifting areas and regions around the world, and people deciding, hey, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to go to war and die, and just a bunch of civil unrest in the 60s. By the time you got to the early 70s, getting off the gold standard, people associate the 1970s with that loss of American innocence, that whole work ethic of, hey, if I work really hard, I can be somebody. The opportunity thing seems to be gone. So there's this despondency in a lot of films. And one of the beautiful things about this film, just content aside, is one, it looks great. You can see it on a few streaming services. It's a good looking film, but it's shot very colorfully early on, again, to your point with him and his wife. And the short amount of time we see her, you definitely feel a bond between those two in chemistry, and it's done tastefully and everything. And Bronson's a classic middle-aged dude, and she's a nice woman, and they have a nice life and all that. So no keeping up with the Joneses or any of that sort of stuff. And then, like you say, something happens, and he's just shocked. And I think the thing about Bronson people used to give him shit about was the fact that he's got that stone-faced killer look. But here, he definitely is grieving because after after the incident happens, he's in his office, and it's contrasted against the fact that he's a very successful white collar individual. He's an architect. So the people in New York are like, hey, you got to go to Tucson and set this cowboy straight, because we got all this land here and we can't make money based off the numbers you give. So go out there and figure it out.
It was
And it's
more
a nice
like
contrast, because the guy just has a different perspective on life.
And it's more like, not because they wanted to go, they because of that, they wanted to go because he's always grieving. It'd be best for they get him out of New York, especially his daughter is basically in a vegetative state. Like she can move around stuff, but she's not all there.
Catatonic, literally
as he walks around. So him dealing with that, and then dealing with his son-in-law. Because I forgot that the daughter was married.
Right.
So seeing that, it was refreshing. But man, this movie, like I said, going through every single scene in this movie is basically it's not there's no filler. It's basically everything ties in, everything builds up what it needs to be. It's well paced, well written. Like you said. So basically, he goes to Arizona. Tucson, Arizona. He goes on there. He's like first. He's kind of like, okay, whatever, I'll go there. And before he goes though, his son-in-law says, well, he's like, because he went over to have dinner with them, and he's like, yeah, well, you saw a psychiatrist. He's like, well, he's like, see another one. I don't like her sleeping. She's sleeping too much. And he says, well, the new one we saw today said we'd be a change of scenery be fine. He's like, no, basically to get away from you. He's like, well, how do I remind her? He's like, well, it was your place, and every time she sees you, she sees mom. And they kind of like butt heads a little, but then he realizes, you know what? Hey, I'm gonna be gone. I don't know how long I'm gone. So they leaves, goes to Arizona, gets involved with this guy. He basically has his gun club, and when they're first shooting those 1870s little hand pistols, he's got the little not a hand cannon, but we call them basically pistols, revolvers, belonging to Candy Dandy. I love that name, Candy Dandy. Like, what the heck? But anyway, he says, here, how much you shoot this first? He's like, and then he shoots it right down the middle. He's like, holy crap! The guy's like, and he's like, well, where did you serve? The guy was in Korea. It was a CO medic. Oh, it's like, you're a corporal. He's like, no, I was conscientious objector. And he's like, holy shit! For someone who doesn't like guns, you sure know how to shoot it. And he brings up his dad. Dad was a big hunting thing. His mom was basically kind of anti-gun. She was the opposite, and his dad got shot because somebody mistook him for a deer. And since he was 10 years old or 12, he never really cared for guns, But he always says, as he shoots, takes the other gun, he's like, can I try this one? Tries one. He's like, yeah, I love my father. And you see him shooting down the target. And so when he gets back, he has the gun. And I love it how he the way he goes out. Because now he's got the feel for it. He's got the tool. And before he had this the roll of quarters, $20 rolls, $20 in the 4 rolls, and he used.
He had that rolled up in a sock.
Yeah, but he didn't take them out of the roller. He kept them rolled in the things.
Right.
So when he hits the guy, he knocked the guy out, or at least put him away. But I love the authenticity of New York, because New York was a shithole in the 70s, and it's gone back to the way it was, sadly, with the crime, the muggings, and all the rapes. Sorry, it's just the way it is. I know people don't like that 4-letter R word, but it happens every day.
Well, here's the thing. Let's pause here for a second, because we're about halfway through the movie, and actually, when people think this is an action film, it's really not. It's more of a thriller. You can call it exploitative or whatever because of the intensity of some of the scenes, but some of the things that are done smartly that you've pointed out, now I want to mention too, is that whatever happens at the beginning happens, and yes, it's a trigger for what he's doing, but he just doesn't automatically just say, I'm going to go start whacking a bunch of people.
No.
What I liked about Bronson in here was the fact that, if you look at his age there, he goes, the housing developer who runs a gun club, who's a part of it's asking him about, hey, which war was yours? I mean, World War II or the Korean War? Because people never talk about Korean, right?
No.
And so he's like, yeah, it was Korean. They're talking. But here's the thing that really stands out well. This movie was about 50 years old. So it makes sense that his father was a hunter, probably grew up on the farm. Guns were very commonplace when you were younger. You had them. And it wasn't until people started moving towards the cities and you got a little more industrialized, say, over the past 100+ years or so, that even though the guns are still very popular in the United States, there was less of an emphasis on them for day-to-day survival, for lack of a better term. Like if you're out in the middle of nowhere, which most people were on a farm, you hunted, period.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting the way they talk about some of these class roles in society and bring them up without being direct. So like his son-in-law that he's talking to is not a bad guy.
No.
But he represents the new age kind of guy that's like, ooh, icky kind of guns. Let's talk it out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about psychology and all the stuff that can help out. Whereas Bronson represents the old guard, and you can tell that the young guy, even though he loves him as a father-in-law or whatever, he's not quite sure that he's, his head's like current. And the beautiful thing too is when he goes out to basically tell the developer, hey man, if we're going to invest a shit ton of money in you, we got to turn a profit. This is what they got. The numbers aren't going to work. I'm out here to make it, to save your ass. And the guy's like, well, I'm willing to work with you a little bit. And he's like, well, I'm willing to work with you a little bit too. And so he just stops. And this is a real life example of him going through changing his perception, because he does it, what you could argue positively and negatively, because he's a successful architect, right? So him and this guy had this open conversation, and the guy's like, no, you got to look at it this way. This is an old town. We need to have open space, not like New York City where you come from. They're not arguing. They're not fighting. They're just talking about what they value and why it's important. So they find common ground to do it. And as a thank you for him at the end, what I thought, this is a great manly, not bromance, but manly scene. The guy sees him off the airport because Bronson's like, here we go. I'm taking the 10:30 flight. What do I tell him? He's like, tell him it's a deal. So he drops him off there and he goes, hey, I got some presents for you. I just want to let you know, if you ever get tired of that shithole New York, basically is what he says. I think he might have called it a toilet. He goes, you're welcome out here. I'd love to have you. And they shake hands or whatever like that and they leave. When he gets home, that's when he opens up the gifts and he realizes, hey, shit, I got this beautiful gun. It's a nice little way to kind of set up saying he's going to do it, because to your point, when he knocks the dude out with a roll of quarters, he's like shocked, like, or scares the guy, like, oh my God, this guy runs off. But then when he gets the gun and he baits the one dude at first, he goes back home. He's basically like puking and throwing up. He can't believe it, but he feels empowered. That's what's beautiful about his character arc here.
I was gonna go build off from the conversation, because they really paint off where the developer down in Tucson, Arizona, has cowboy hammer. He's pro gun. He's pretty much what you consider your Bible and my gun. He says, like, there's so many people are basically raised up to believe that guns are icky. They're afraid that if they touch it, it's like a viper. It's going to bite them, because they're convinced it's scary. Guns are scary. You shouldn't have guns. And he basically points out, it was hunting. It was for protection. He said, there ain't no mugging around here. Anybody who thinks they're kind of trying to mug anybody around here is going to end up, pretty much regretting it instantly. So yeah, when he gets that, guy does give him the gun. So he has that gun. He looks at it and he looks there and it's like, it even has his name on there. Stuff. Paul Kersey, a gift to Paul. He puts it inside his office. At his home, he puts it in the office. He has a little safe there. Mm-hmm. But when he goes out. He takes the gun with him, and he doesn't just hold the gun, blast it out. He has his hands in the pocket like the old Westerners do. Yeah, the trench coat.
Yes.
So he walks out with his business coat stuff. He goes down there. This guy walks up behind him. He's like,
you got any money?
Give me your money. And turn around slowly. And he just turns around and he just shoots from the coat, from the hip, and just shoots him. Like, I was like, dang. And then he like leaves him. And I love this, because before he hasn't killed anybody. Even in the war, he was basically a medic, so he's seen death, and it obviously it doesn't like it. He instantly goes home. He stumbles in the door. He's so nauseous. He runs in the bathroom, and then you hear him. He leans over to play, and he's just retching, and he's barfing his guts out. And then the thing is that even before this, the quarter thing, his hand was kind of shaking a little bit, because he's starting to get like that, that's that vibe,
It's good acting. It really is.
When you actually start doing stuff, start getting stuff. And this is the thing he's been craving. He's been craving revenge, because he feels like a failed father. He wasn't able to protect his wife and his daughter. His daughter is a reminder every day that he failed. So now he's doing this. The cops have no leads. Now the crazy thing about this is that this cop, the main cop, I forgot his name is, the actor is. I think it's what's.
Oh, I don't even remember.
I'm looking. I was looking at IMDb, but anyway, the cop. The inspector, he basically walks up to him, or walks up to the victim there. Frank Ocha is his character's name. Vincent Gardenia is awesome in this. He walks up to where in the park. A jogger said, and he learns that he's told that a jogger came across the body there. The guy basically tried to rob Bronson the night before, and the guy starts talking, and he's like, and instantly this is a goof on this part because the guy somehow he's like he knew like that Bronson didn't steal anything because if they're theorizing, the other cops are there is like, well, maybe it's two hoodlums trying to rob each other, and then Frank says like, well, the other guy didn't take, this guy still has his money in the wallet. How does he know? He just walked up there. No one said anything to him. I was like, this. I laugh at that scene because it's such a goof on the writer or whoever's directing it because there's no way he had the information unless they told him in his car, called him.
Yeah, I mean, you get the point.
I know, but it always stands out to me, But so then they still have no idea who the vigilante is. But then and this is where the movie just kind of like now that he's got that urge, he's killed somebody, but it feels good.
Yeah.
So he starts doing.
Daddy's going out and he ain't going home until he scratches his itch.
Oh my god! Oh my! I love it.
So he goes on a subway where all the disgusting vermin of the world are.
Well, yeah. Well, that's later. I think he goes with the two guys try to jump him, too. And either way, he
blows them off. So he's already done it. So now he's getting good at his craft.
Yeah, and especially he waits in the subway train at the very end. Can't wait to see people get off. And now I gotta love this because this really does raise the answer: should the vigilantism be allowed? Because in the subway train, there's a cop there. Sees these two clearly shady guys. Sees them. He turns around and goes into a different car. Leaves them to leave. Even though these guys clearly look. I'm sorry. Profiling exists because it matters. If someone looks like they're gonna murder someone, I don't care which skin color.
Profiling. The bottom line is you're profiling actions and certain sets of characteristics and traits. In the 70s, it was extremely dangerous in some of the major cities to be going out with stuff. But again, pre-cameras, pre-cell phones, pre-identification, you could get away with murder, literally.
But yeah, so these guys, but most of the punks didn't have guns. If they did, only a few of them did. Most of them had switchblades, which were butterfly knives, So, but I said this cop that's on the subway train, sees them, loses his nerve, tucks his manhood between his legs, and walks the other way. These two walk down. The two hoodlums walk down. Finally, get to Paul Kersey's trailer. So at the end, they're in this section. There's a passed out bum on the seat, and then the other two couple get off. They leave because they know something's going to go down.
Oh yeah.
Paul Kersey stays on there. They come up to him with knives, and he just shoots both of them, and then gets off. He walks off. He gets up, and then as he walks up, a lady walks in, and she screams, and then he goes up the steps. The cops run. They're in the paddy wagon. This is funny too. Basically the pimps and the hoes were basically calling like, "Oh, there goes the useless," making fun of the cops because they do their job. Yeah. He goes up, walks past the paddy wagon where the cops are. They ran down. They have no idea, where he is. They're like, "Where is he? Do you see any money?" He just kind of blends in. And I love this because in the alleyway, I think it was like the first one. The second one. It was the second one. Yeah, it was the alleyway. This guy is getting mugged by a group of guys. Paul Kersey walks down the alley, saves the guy by shooting all of them. The guy turns and runs away, shoots him in the back as he's trying to climb the fence after he had shot him. I'm like, and it is like, but I'll just say the first death he did, the first murder, is basically he shot the guy in the gut. You see him gurgling. Like they said it was in the chest, but it was in the gut. It was in the gut where he shot him, or at least say there. And the guys just, I was like, they really want you to make it a feel. And that's why it was such a strong response from Kersey, from Charles Bronson, the actor, throwing up the toilet because it was such a gnarly, ugh.
Well, you don't realize when you're watching the film, like how gritty and disgusting it was. Because I was a baby in the 70s, and I was a teenager of the 80s, so definitely been in some older situations. Again, this movie's 50 years old, so you could make something like this today, but you'd have to probably tweak some things about it. Well, one of the things that's interesting is you mentioning how you clearly see the cop that's on board the subway basically be like, I ain't getting in the middle of this. I got to worry about my pension and walk off. And I think some of the things about the movie that people really shit on it were two things you mentioned. One, the scene where he baits the three guys that are coming after him, where he saves the older couple, and the dude's running away, and he just shoots him in the back. And a lot of people would say, "Oh, you know,
Guy.
you didn't need to. You know, we have
But-
something here in Florida called the Castle Doctrine, which you can defend all that and shoot someone in the back. A lot of places you can't. So people are like, "Oh, that was graphic. That was unnecessary." And it had that bright red blood that you love. But then the other thing too is a little bit later on, you start realizing that whether you believe in premarital relations with a partner, or you like men that pretend to be women, or escorts, or ladies of the night, or any sort of alternative lifestyle, right? No matter what's considered acceptable today, the point is you get the vibe that all of them realize it doesn't matter if you're liberal, a middle-aged white guy, a streetwalker, a drug dealer, or well, I shouldn't say drug dealer for this movie, but just if you're just a random person, the government does not care about you whatsoever. So it's kind of funny as it goes on, you start seeing everybody looking at the cops and just going, they're not just like got their hands tied because of the system like we'd see in Dirty Harry, right? What you would see is the fact that, no, they're just scared, useless idiots.
The two main characters in this whole movie, everyone else is kind of useless. They're kind of, well, not useless, but man, they're forgettable. The two main characters, either you are pro Paul Kersey or you are pro cop Frank, who says, I don't care, murder is wrong. The law is the law. Once we take a law in our hands, it's like, who decides? It's kind of, and that's kind of how if you also watch like shows like Gotham, same thing with that was with James Gordon. There's so much corruption, but he believed the law exists for a reason. Without the law, there's nothing. And so you're really divided in this movie. Either because they really seduce you with the whole vigilantism, as far as like, because they say he's the one group where says like it. So what do you talk, Mr. Mayor, what do you have to say about crime and muggings being down like 500? They were 900, now down there like 400 something, this is last week. And they said that's not true. They lie. And they even they tell Frank that the inspector says, we want you to get rid of this guy. He's bad for business. Pretty much they want crime to go back up. And Frank's just like, I just wanted to hear you say that one more time, because he asked him again. And he's like, I'll scare him off. He's like, yeah. The mayor's like, yeah, you scare him off. I'm like, he's saying, and I love it because he's like, this guy's going around cleaning up the town. You don't like him, and you don't want to murder, but it's like he is in such a predicament where he works for corrupt people, but he's also got this guy who's also going around and getting rid of the corruption, doing something he can't. Basically, What I'm saying is, Paul Kersey is kind of like Batman that kills. He cleans up the town for him. And and it's just like, what do you do? Because like, I love how the reboot actually really leans into this too, because they have the radio talk show talks about it. Mm-hmm. Are you this guy's doing a good job, and somebody's like, well, and it's the same argument. They're like, well, it's murder. Murder should be wrong. Let the cops do their job. And they reply, well, the cops aren't doing their job. When's it enough? And this movie, like I said, this movie is such a big debate, very controversial.
They put it through the eyes of a particular person, right? So he's not making speeches about right, wrong.
No. The writer was very anti-gun. He did not want this to be a pro-gun movie.
Exactly.
I love that. That's what I loved about this movie. They said, that's nice to know, but we're gonna let people decide for themselves. And honestly, every day I question whether a character like Paul Kersey or even the Punisher should even be allowed to exist, because at this point where I pay taxes for somebody, the protect, keep me safe, do this up, and they can't even do that because they're so corrupt themselves. What point do we just say no more? I'm not encouraging anybody to go do anything. I'm just saying, it's like, this always brings up the whole thing. When is enough? Well,
and that's the whole thing too. I mean, this isn't really, we're not so much talking about local politics or what we believe, but nationally speaking, this was a thing. And so over the past 4 or 5 years, one might argue that things are going back to the way they were in the 70s. And this movie is an example of kind of like the middle class kind of like response to all the corruption that's out there and all the filth and grime and grit and all that stuff. And it's interesting because I don't think he's really necessarily painted to be a hero or a sick psycho, or you could argue like the Punisher, where they definitely glorified the violence in the TV show, and it was done well. But this is a human being that we see early on. So it's like much different than before.
This is more like a real life situation. The Punisher was more glorious. There's no way he could get all the stuff he does, machine gun stuff. This is more realistic. It's like a guy going with a handgun. This is before they had forensic DNA.
not really to the level
They matched
we
bullets, but
now,
they couldn't
and
do
they
it.
had fingerprints, but I mean, it's
And they
just
know like blood DNA and all that stuff. They couldn't. The big database they have now, like Big Brother has on you,
right.
like there were cameras, but like not every single place had a camera. Maybe on the inside, but not on the outside in the alleyways and stuff. So like people had stuff on the entrance of the door. Maybe that's about it. Nowadays, like I said, this movie, I was surprised they even did a reboot with everybody having smartphones. There's no way you can get away with this. And I want to bring up one thing that relates to that. There is one way someone can get away from doing with the reboot, with doing what he's doing, is the fact that when the guy who got mugged by the group of hoodlums in the alleyway and Paul Kersey came and rescued him, when he was interviewed by Frank basically is like, and you didn't see anything. He's like, oh, I didn't see anything. He's like, you're fucking lying. And he's like, he knows because the people who are victims are tired of this shit. They're protecting Paul Kersey.
Yeah.
The point. So, and that's honestly, this movie does, I don't want to say glorifying vigilantism, but it does make you question it.
No, I will disagree, and I'll put it in this perspective. This is a little bit of the libertarian part coming out,
Yeah.
and it's part of where libertarian movement kind of got a little popular in the 60s, 70s. Is not really a conservative thing. It's more of a government. Supposedly, the United States with the Constitution, we have sovereign rights. They're given to us by God, and whether you believe that or not. And so, any rights that we choose to give the government to manage and do will do. They just don't automatically have everything else that's not ours. And so a lot of people don't really even get that. And again, no matter how you feel politically, one of the interesting things is people seem to forget that the government is the only entity that's out there that exists that can come at you with literally the force of violence behind a gun. And that's what police are. Police are not there to serve and protect and to be pillars of the community and all that. They're the militant physical force of the law to drag you into place, to pay taxes and do stuff and take from you. That's not, and this movie just kind of, if you have never thought about it before, this movie is going to make you think of that. Because to your point, no matter where you are, what your background is or what your lifestyle is, there's a certain amount of, what's right and wrong morally, regardless of what the law says. And so here, everybody's like, yeah, we ain't saying shit because bro's taking care of me, whether he means to or not, and that's human nature that never goes away.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I don't want to encourage anything like this, like I said, obviously. But like,
no, but you and I even talked about with Dirty Harry, right?
Yeah,
very militant, but like the main cop, that to your point, the guy that's like investigating all this, he knows it's Kersey. He just doesn't have the proof, right?
Yeah.
So today we have no knock warrants. We have all sorts of stuff. The guy he just breaks into his apartment to find data and stuff, which would never hold up in court. You know what I mean? The guy's just a scumbag. He really is.
Yeah. But like, even he's like, he wants to arrest Kersey, but the mayor's office it doesn't care. They don't want it because they'll make him. If you arrest him, they'll make him a martyr, and they'll have more vigilantes.
Yeah.
Like I said, as I like about the Batman comics, because this really every day to day was kind of like this. You had these criminals that the cops couldn't stop, or they didn't want to stop because they're a corrupt police force. You had a guy going out, wasn't killing anybody, but he was still beating him up. He was working with a guy kind of like Frank to bring justice to the city. So that's why I love when they made Gotham City was basically based off of New York City's crime and all that stuff when they're doing these movies or comic books.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's such but this movie, like I said, some people will refuse to watch it because they said, oh, it's just pro-gun. No, it's more like
pro. It's not about guns.
It's not about guns at all. It's more about right and wrong. And obviously, murder is wrong, but it's also kind of a gray area too because murder. We have people fight wars, and it's either self-defense. But what Kersey's doing is not self-defense. To a point, he is, but he's going out looking for trouble. He's looking for trouble,
and there's nothing illegal about that.
Yeah,
it's just like you could say a woman who dresses a certain way. Well, she had it coming. That's not an argument.
I know, but I mean.
But it's not a big thing with it.
The biggest thing he was breaking the law, was carrying a gun in New York, which is illegal. So if he didn't have the gun and he got attacked and he beat the other guy, would he go to jail with the quarter thing? Is that considered illegal? Well, they'd probably arrest him and say he was. They probably. Like I said, back then, maybe I don't know about today's cops, but I imagine like there are some of them probably like, dude, you know what you're doing. I don't have time for this shit. They're gonna lock you up.
Right.
slap your wrist. That's why I said Frank is basically like your everyday average cop. He seemed very realistic. He didn't seem like, I don't hate Frank. I don't think Frank's wrong. Frank has a sense of right and wrong. He wants to get this done. He even says like we don't have clues on, but don't tell the cops or don't tell the press, so we don't have clues. So we have clues. We just have 1,000 clues we're following up on. And it's like he's like, by God and Jesus, we're going to get this guy. And he's determined to uphold the law. Paul Kersey says the law doesn't work anymore. The system's broken. Look what happened to my family. Everyone else is a victim. No one cares. And the mayor obviously is shown to be someone who he's a top 1%er, doesn't give a care.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen to him. So, like I said, this is such a very controversial movie. I will always recommend people to watch it. It is fun. I mean, the look on these criminals' faces when he pulls out a gun, they're like, oh shit, the one guy gets shot and he runs away. He's like, no, and he shoots in the back. The two hoodlums, the knives, come on, old man, give us what you want. And he shoots one guy. The other guy runs, he shoots him. He runs up the steps, falls in front of the cop. The cops run down there to chase Paul Kersey because he's not there. And, it's even at the end when Frank confronts Paul Kersey, who'd been shot in the leg or stabbed in the leg. He's in the hospital. He's like, I found this. This is your gun, Paul Kersey. Basically, he's like, I can take this in. It can lock you up, or you can leave town, go somewhere else. Your nice fancy job, you can go work anywhere else, but here. And honestly, I wonder what it would have been an alternate ending if he would have arrested Paul Kersey. Like,
well, what's the point of that? So the whole point was that did he get away with it or not? Did the cops know? I think it's just basically saying this is where we're at in society at the point of the movie. It wasn't if you arrest him, it's like buzzkill. It doesn't work. I think
it would kill sequels.
Emphasize what Paul Kersey went through in the movie.
Realistically, I think he would have arrested him. But because it's Hollywood and he wants to make like sequels, they left it open like he's just gonna leave. And you see him when he's on the subway train. He looks the guy and goes.
Well,
I love that. I love
Chicago, another big city. And a bunch of thugs in there are messing around with this really cute chick, with some packages and all that. And they're making, gestures and stuff like that. And he's talking to the dude. And this part I like, and this is the part that might have triggered people a lot because he says to the guy really quietly, he goes, excuse me. And he walks over and he just starts bending down and picking up some of the packages for his young, hot 20-something blonde or like that. And these guys are hooting and hollering and they look at him. And then he looks and then he smiles and he gives them the finger gun. So to me, I don't know movies, and this is something I would ask our audience, that's watched older movies. And we've got to figure out what the first movies that had finger guns. Because to me, everyone loves a little pew, 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 and then you get them, and you're like, oh, this fucker's going to take it all out on them because that's all he's got anything to look forward to, right? He's got the resources, he's got the ability. Why not? I mean, if that's your thing. But I think the thing that upset people, and they don't want to admit it, is the fact that most people got a sense of entitlement growing up, spoiled, say, in the 60s, whether they're boomers or not or what. I don't mean to shit on them particularly, and that's not what we're doing with the movie. We're not even really talking politics. We're talking the movie. However, it's kind of like you relied on the government to do everything, and when the government fails, it's got to be left on you. And it's like, oh my God, somebody actually did it. How wrong are things for that to happen? I think that's a part of the message of the movie too, is that eventually at some point, whether you have the law or not, or no matter who you are, you have to be responsible for yourself. And I like that self-responsibility message to it, because a lot of people just said, oh, well, the government will take care of me. I can get on welfare. I can do this. I can do that. You had a big split in the 70s of a lot of cultures and classes and all that. And that really was the breakdown of the modern family unit here in America from the 60s and moving forward, definitely.
Yeah, like I said, just going through this, looking at the cast too. I mean, Helen Martin makes appearance in here. She's one of the older ladies in here. I think she's she's the one she's the cop, right? Or in the department center.
I think so.
Yeah, and then you have freak number one. You know what freak number one is, right?
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum.
Who actually did look bad in his role. And Christopher Guest was also in here too. He'd be on Saturday Night Live later.
If you go on right now on Goldblum, the IMDb, type in Jeff Goldblum, look at his photo. Actually, just type in Death Wish 1974, go on IMDb, and scroll down where it says Jeff Goldblum, and it says freak number one. He's got that silly grin on his face. He's got the tie-dye. He looks like a freak in his face. So I thought that's kind of funny that how it fits. But so like police commissioner was Stephen Elliott. I'm sure he's been in a few different things.
Mm-hmm.
You had Sam Williams Renfield's in your 2, which I remember. I think he's
A
been in
son-in-law is somebody you've recognized if you watched older television.
Steve Keats.
Yeah, whatever his name is.
Yeah, William
You look at him,
Redfield.
go, oh, that guy.
William Redfield is from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He's also in Fantastic Voyage. And before that, he was on Kitty Foyle from back in 1958. So, like I said, these older movies, there's a lot of people that pop up in this, so it's really cool to look at the cast. Like Vincent Gardenia, he has a look like he's been in a bunch of things. Hope Lange played Joanne Kersey, beautiful woman.
Yes.
Little Shop of Horrors is what Frank's also known for. Basically, Vincent Gardenia. He's also in Heaven Can Wait, Moonstruck. Guy was in a lot of movies. He was on Twilight Zone before that. He was Harry Falk. He was the segment healer. So it's kind of cool to go back and IMDb. I love IMDb as much as far as I don't care about the rankings, what the how the movie is, but I like that gives you the list, the cast, and you click on it. It's a database. You can actually see where this person's been in. So I love when we ever review movies like this, I always go that. And thank you for paying me IMDb for that awesome appraisal. But no, no. But this movie, I will not deny that I did not pop and laugh every time he took down a bad guy. If I was going to rob him, and the guy turns away, he's like, "No witnesses," because he did it twice. He shot a guy twice. 2 guys running away. One guy was in the alleyway, climbed the fence, shot him in the back. He dies. The other guy shot him in the gut, and then he shot him in the back as he was running around, and then he dies on the curb. Oh wow, yeah, he dies. Yeah, and dude, like I said, I've always asked myself. I put myself in Paul Kersey saying, it's not more sort of revenge. It's more so it's like you have to defend yourself, and he does this. He shoots the first guy. Obviously, I'd be identified with him as far as throwing up. Would I go and do this? Probably not. But I would defend myself if somebody came at me. I'm not going to go looking for it. That's the difference. He needed some kind of therapy, and he probably should have went to see a psychiatrist or something. But would have been a good movie.
Yeah, I think that two small things about this as we're finishing up here with our final thoughts. I think one, actually, I'll say 3 things. One quick thing I was talking about how slick the movie is. I love how it's filmed like in the wintertime because you've got a blizzard, you've got this bleakness to it and all that, but it's actual legitimate snow, like when they have the funeral and some other scenes walk around and snow lad. There's tons of shadows. Obviously, he spends a lot of time at night. It makes you respect what it's like when it's dark outside, that all of a sudden it's just has a potential for danger. It's scarier. It's not suburbia, right? And the other thing too about it is one thing I think that helps is I had forgotten, but in the 80s, there's a really popular song called Rocket by a musician named Herbie Hancock. And he actually scored this movie. And I was like, oh, that's right. I saw the credits. I'm like, that's right. This guy's been around for a while. He used to teach like some music stuff or whatever on some of the kids' channels back when I was a kid. I remember seeing all that. But, it was scored well. This is, whether you like the content of the movie or not, this is a very well done film. It's very polished. It's got, like I said, one of the most popular actors at that time for a long time. It's really well done. And the last thing I'll say about this, besides tell everybody if you haven't seen it, go see it and don't read about it, is you and I have always talked about, and I bring it up a lot more than you, that if you don't have somebody to root for, who gives a shit? Right. So it's kind of like in here, you don't automatically love him, but you do see him, and even though he's a liberal and he's anti-gun and all that, you understand him as a human being, as a man protecting your family, as a husband, a father, all the roles that we want to ascribe to and not be basic and juvenile and a thug. And he's worked hard to get where he's at. He's a professional. He's treated well, and he's very humble. He is a role model in that sense, regardless of the politics involved. But to see the fact that this is the only way to take action, I think is good. And the fact is all the thugs, it was good in here that they're random, they're nameless, they're goon number 1, whatever thug number 2. We're not supposed to know their backstory or go, well, yeah, it was starving, so they had to steal groceries. Screw that. This has nothing to do with that. This is watching a character, through no fault of his own, kind of go down the rabbit hole, and the only way he could survive is by taking it upon himself. So it's a classic kind of, you get challenged by something, grow out of your problems, and if the answer to it is vigilantism, so be it. And this is also a Dino De
Yeah.
Laurentiis film. He's done a shit ton of stuff, I believe. Yeah, just a shit ton of stuff. So this was not just a, oh, let's make a small movie and hope it does well. This is a big time hit.
Yeah.
Very good movie.
Well, it
Did
was.
Conan, which is one of my favorite films.
So
This-
reading on Wikipedia, he says that Bronson was 52 years old when he did this film, and basically he'd only been known for the
physique, too, in this film.
to everyone outside the U.S. They only knew him from The Great Escape. So this became like it's like I said, it just became a big hit for him, and just everything with this like the reception. A lot of people said, "Oh, it's gonna encourage antisocial behavior and all this blah blah blah." But the funniest thing about this, how this movie came together, was Bronson talking to Michael Wienerman. I think it's his name, Wienerman or Weinman. Can't remember how you pronounce his name. Let me look real quick. But Michael Winner, sorry. Wienerman. No, Michael Winner and Charles Bronson, basically like they had just done a movie together, and he's like, hey, what do you want to do another one? He's like, sure. Like Bronson's like, well, the only good script I got here is like this Death Wish, where this wife and daughter are mugged, and he goes around, and get a revenge or shooting bad guys, muggers. And he's like, what I think he said is like, do you want to do that? He's like, and Bronson's like, what do you mean? Like, do the movie? And like Winter's like, no, shoot bad guys. Like I said, the lighthearted between these guys. Like Bronson always comes off, and he's got that resting face. He looks old. He's only 52 years old, but he always has that somber face. Like he doesn't take shit. But he cuts loose, and you see him a little bit in this movie. He's having fun as the acting doing this, the smiling, laughing. It's a good move. It was a good out for him. I think that's probably mainly what's kind of saved his career, boosted it, going through from the 70s to the 80s. Because when by the second time that came out, it was like 1982, I think, or 81, when the second movie came out.
Right.
It was a totally different scene in here. And then we got the return of Frank, which I thought was kind of cool. He comes back to help track him down. But overall, like I said, we talk about movies that have sequels. I liked Death Wish 2. I thought it was a good sequel. The third one started out a little, it was right.
It's a canon classic. It's not that kind of film. It's still
no. But I mean, like, not many movies have sequels. The sequels are actually still good. Where you just because a lot of times it's like, wow, it just dipped in quality, and then the third one, like, perfect example would be the Resident Evil movies. I like the first one. Then what the hell started happening? But they started going crappy. Fortunately, Mission Impossible it's the only franchise I can think of that still had good sequels going afterwards. Bond started out with good sequels, and then they kept rebooting everything, and then it just went crap. So, but final thoughts: watch this movie, decide for yourself. You can answer that question. Are you Paul Kersey, pro Paul Kersey, or are you anti Paul Kersey? That's all I gotta say.
I would love to see a film that's this kind of brutal and adult and treats the source material with a bit of respect.
Yeah.
Obviously, they made some changes making the movie from the book. Even though Bruce Willis did the remake, it still got kind of that hey, I'm cool Bruce Willis vibe to it, as opposed to this bleak that, okay, he lost his wife, he ends up in Chicago. Is he really any better off? No. Is society any better off? No, it doesn't have that kind of vibe that this movie has. This movie is a very good movie. It's great.
This character has the worst luck here. He builds his life like 3 times.
Yeah.
Second movie, he meets another girl. Third movie, he meets another girl. It's like, how many times you can keep meeting women and they're going to keep dying? It's like, maybe Paul Kersey's the problem. I don't know, but I'll just say this. These are my favorites. We brought up Dirty Harry, the Dirty Harry franchise, and then the Death Wish franchise. These are my favorite collections to watch.
The Death Wish is a lot harder to, I think, watch and rewatch. I think they're better films. I think, obviously, the Dirty Harry ones, he leans into the stylistic part of it a bit, which is fun, especially because it's during the day. But again, it's a different perspective. It's from the cop's perspective who's been on there, and it's looking on it from the inside. So he's one of them, even though he's a good guy. He's one of the last of the good guys, but still one of them. Whereas Paul Kersey's he's a nobody. He's a middle-class dude.
What if imagine if they would have had Paul Kersey versus Harry? Like in a movie together, the crossover thing. That would have been interesting to see. Paul Kersey goes to San Francisco.
Uh,
Who do you root for?
any excuse to watch a Bronson film. I mean, honestly.
Exactly. Bronson versus Eastwood. That would have been a great film.
All right, guys, there you have it. Death Wish 1974, Charles Bronson. If you've not seen this film, check it out. It's definitely worth it. Don't read it. Don't watch the trailers. Just go into it cold. And it's 90 minutes of, to your point, RDV. It's well paced. There's no slow parts. It's a thriller. So just look at it from there. And it's a film that doesn't have a lot of talking or moral messages in it. Just watch it and see what you think about it. It's a very divisive film. It's one that still 50 years later we can talk about because it's that damn good.
All right.
Have a good night, everybody. Anything you need to plug, RDV?
I'm just going to say, if you guys haven't already done so, please go down there, click the like button, hit the also subscribe. Make sure your notification bell is turned on so you get all the notifications. We try to go around the same time on Tuesdays and Sundays. And it's also there on the homepage. List of stuff we do. Thursdays, we're trying to get back on Thursdays again, so bear with us. But I also thank you all guys for being here. Thank you for commenting, Maranya. Anybody else who hasn't commented, be afraid to. There's no wrong opinions. We're not gonna, belittle anybody. So don't be afraid to comment on the live chat or even on the comment down below. So that being said, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you on Sunday.
Good night now.
Later, guys.